You probably heard of a guy named Bear Grylls. He does this show on TV where he gets dropped off in remote locations and he's got to find his way back to civilization, or at least to some point where he can get rescued from. Now while he's doing that, he's got to survive out in the wild. He's got to find food and water, warmth and shelter. Now Bear Grylls might call it man versus wild, but here in Australia we call it camping. And that's what I'm doing. I'm camping out in a remote location in Western Australia. Now what would you do if you were camping in the middle of nowhere and all of a sudden you got hungry for a hot pie? You can't just go down to your local bakery and buy one because there is no local bakery. Well, I reckon that if Bear Grylls was camping in Australia and all of a sudden he got hungry for a hot pie, he'd go and hunt for a witchetty grub. And when he found one, he'd eat it. But I'm an Australian. Do you want to know what I'd do? I'd go to my fridge. I'd pull out a pie. I'd whack it on the fry pan. I'd heat it up and I'd eat it. After all, I'm hungry for a hot pie, not a witchetty grub. Now the first thing that's important about a hot pie when you're camping, if you don't have a fancy dancy oven to cook one in properly, is that your pie already needs to be cooked. Now you can buy them cooked like what I do, or if they're not already cooked, cook them up at home. You could even make your own, cook them up at home, but whack them in the freezer, because if they're in the freezer they last a long time. Then you can whack them in your portable freezer and keep them for your whole camping trip. The only thing about them being in the freezer is that you can't just put a frozen pie straight on the fry pan. Otherwise what you'll end up with is hot pastry wrapped around a pie ice block. And I don't care how hot it is, I don't want a pie ice block. So the next secret you got to know is that the day before you're suddenly hungry for a hot pie, you've got to know that you'll be suddenly hungry for a hot pie the next day. And so you take your pies out the freezer and you put them in the fridge. Then they can defrost overnight. Then the next day, when all of a sudden you're hungry for a hot pie, you can go and pull a pie out your fridge and whack it on your fry pan. Now the next secret to having a hot pie is you got to warm it up using a low heat. Now the reason for that is that if you use a high heat, all you're going to do is heat up the outside and the inside's still going to be cool. I'm even going to go one step further and I'm going to offset my pan so the flame's down here and my pie's up there. Going to put the lid on there to create a bit of an oven-like effect. Now while you're waiting for it, if you happen to be in a part of Australia where you do have some reception on your mobile device, just make sure you don't get distracted by it like I have done in the past, because otherwise you might come back to find smoke billowing out the sides, and trust me, when you're already hungry for a hot pie, that's no fun. Now your pie's been in there for a little while. Just check it, and when you can see that it's just going nice and toasted on the bottom, it might still not be heated all the way through. Just flip it over upside down, put the lid back on, and once again, don't get distracted. Now that your pie is heated up all the way through, it's ready to eat. Or maybe not. There's one more thing that I want to do. Now you might be wondering why I'm cutting the top open. Well, I want to put on some sauce. Now you might be wondering, why am I putting my sauce on the inside? Well, the answer to that is that I have a moustache. When the sauce is on the top of the pie, it ends up all over. But on the inside, things are a whole lot cleaner. Besides that, I actually like it like this. Now this is the point where I'm meant to take a bite and say, tastes good. But I'm not going to do that because you already know that this is going to taste pretty good. So why don't you go and get yourself a pie or a witchetty grub, whichever one you feel like, and enjoy. I'll catch you next time. Tastes good.